The Iliad, an epic tale of gods and heroes set at Troy over 3,000 years ago. At its heart, the story depicts a great warrior afflicted by terrible rages, Achilles, a war manipulated by gods to take opposing sides. Total war, ancient style. What has the Iliad taught us? My teammates and I will lay that out for you. Let's get into it.
Good afternoon, Professor. My name is Vireak, and I'll be talking about the values and beliefs of Homer. On my part, I will be talking about who is Homer, what was his values, what were his beliefs, and how Homer influenced many other poetry or authors. Homer is a poetry author. He is the author of the Iliad and Odyssey. He was considered a blind poet, where people listened to him daily, sing out his poem, and continue passing it down through generations. During that time, there was no entertainment like TVs, mobile phones, computers, internet, none of that. The only main way for individuals to get entertained is by listening to others sing or read their verse. Homer's way of telling a story is quite unique from others. He talks about multiple stories and connects it to each other. Homer had values and beliefs. Those values were actual skill, fortitude, protection of one's family, companions, property, and most importantly, one of his very own honor and notoriety. The most noteworthy goodness in the Homeric culture was the arete, masculinity, fearlessness, and the most broad sense, and the greatness appropriate to a legend. Homer's most significant commitment to the Greek culture was to give a typical arrangement of qualities that revered the Greeks' own thoughts regarding themselves. His poems provided a fixed model of heroism, nobility, and the good life to which all Greeks, especially aristocrats. Homer's Iliad story was based on the Trojan War. Homer wasn't involved in the war, but he talks about the experience of conflicts between groups who fought during the war and then tries to figure out what it meant in our humanity. Homer's poem was believed to be created just as soon as the alphabet was written. Before his poems were written by others and passed through and continued passing it out through generations, Homer presented his poem by speaking and singing around the country. Homer would go around the country daily and tell them the same story again and again. Homer was honored for his work during the third before Christ, BC, for inspiring other authors to write. Homer has been mentioned by multiple classical Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. The Iliad and Odyssey have been believed to have been influenced by the Trojan War. As of right now, Homer's death is still unknown.
Hello everyone, I'm Xiaoyi and today I'm going to talk about the role of gods, the main character in Iliad, and talk about the theme of the story. Iliad is divided into 24 volumes. The main content is the story of the great expedition to Troy. Through the description of the Trojan War, it praised heroes who were brave and good at fighting, safeguarding collective interests and building materials services for the collective. Iliad mainly writes about war, focusing on the story that happened within 51 days of the 10th year of the Trojan War. Although the war has been going on for more than 9 years, the two sides are still at odds. The Greek coalition commander Agamemnon and the general Achilles retreated from the battlefield because of a dispute caused by a female prisoner. Achilles is the protagonist in the Iliad and the hero of the Trojan War. His withdrawal led to repeated furious on the Greek side and the situation was critical. Achilles' good friend Patroclus put on Achilles' armor and rushed to the battlefield to save the Greek army, but was killed by the Trojan commander Hector. This is the reason why Achilles became angry again, and after his mother asked to crash men to make a new armor for him, he returned to the war and finally killed Hector and achieved a decisive victory. This is the general course of the story. God can go down to the mortal world at any time, unless he is prevented by Zeus. Find any mortal he is looking for and talk about anything he wants to talk about. As a way of communication, mortals can ask God for help through prayer. Like mortals, gods exist in the form of families or clans, and Zeus is the ruler of the gods. The gods in Iliad participated in the activities of heroes, some half humans and half gods, and mortals from beginning to end. At the beginning of the first volume, Homer begged the goddess Muse to sing Achilles' battle wrath while praying for help. We can see that Achilles' character is very sensitive, especially to personal dignity and honor, and no one is allowed to infringe on it. After Achilles was born, his mother, Thetis, learned from the goddess, and his fate was to die in war. But he still insisted on returning to the battlefield to retrieve his glory. Hector cared more about clan and the collective than Achilles. He was a more mature leader and was generally loved by the Trojans. He regards the defense of Troy as his duty, and he considers it shameful to show weakness in front of a powerful enemy. The scenes in Epic Volume 6 describe him saying goodbye when he saying goodbye to his wife and children is very distressing, especially when he stretches out his arm to hug his young son. The baby starts to feel afraid to see his father's helmet and headgear. He chooses to take off it and put the helmet on the ground and then go to kiss the baby. His parents also begged him not to fight Achilles, but he still walked into the battlefield because he knew very well the honorable responsibilities he had to bear. In Iliad, Achilles fought for honor, but Hector fought for his country and family and people. When Achilles could refuse to fight because of the conflict between him and Agamemnon, Hector had to leave his family and fight for the people. Achilles pursues honor and dignity. Hector's pursues for responsibility. In addition, the fate of the two heroes is also destined, and the death of Achilles is predicted by many places too. Thetis told his son so many times not to go back to the war, or he will die, because the death would be not far away. After Hector died, Achilles died too. After all, it's just a game of the gods who live in Olympus. The theme of Iliad is to praise ancient heroes for their strength, wit, and bravery. Next slide, please. And also praise the great achievements and collectivism they have established in fighting with different races. The era is reflected as in a period of great transformation from primitive clan society to slavery society. I think it explains the relationship between man and God, examines the attributes and values of man, and evaluates man's gains and losses in a war.
Hello, my name is Mei, and I'm going to be talking about the symbols and meanings in the Iliad. The Iliad had several symbols that are represented. Those symbols are the ancient ship, eating, shield of Achilles, armor, and the eagle of Zeus. The symbols played a huge description of how they expressed themselves. The first symbol is the ancient ship. The ancient ships are the army's home base. During the war, the armies would camp around the ships. To them, the ancient ship represents home and survival. Because the ships are what's used to travel long distances, the Aeacians are extremely protective of the ship, even going as far as building a wall around them during the Trojan War when the Trojans started to gain grounds on them. Because the ships are a transportation method, meaning that without the ship, they could not get home. The ship also represents power and might, the symbol of crossing the sea to distant war. The second symbol that represents the expression of a characteristic is eating. In Homer, he has employed that the spiritual in eating which is determined by social rules. In the Iliad, when characters eat, it could also represent their state of mind. Achilles chooses not to eat when Patroclus died, showing his sadness and grief at the separation of his peers. But as Achilles fought with Hector, the book showed that he uses cannibalism to express his separation from civilization. In the end, Achilles shares a meal with Priam, reconnecting him with his humanism through the social ritual. The third symbol has to be the shield of Achilles, which also is the most symbolic object in the poem. The shield was made for Achilles by the Hephaestus. The shield represents the world outside the Trojan War, and Achilles ranked in the war as the dominant warrior in the conflict. The illustration on the shield depicts the scenes of the war and peace. There are also scenes of everyday life, which also includes violence that evokes the brutality of war, while the dance's illustration symbolizes the endlessness of time. The ocean river that runs around the shield represents that they bound the world without end. The reason why his shields are symbol was because of the endurance of his shield that separates his status from his comrades. The fourth symbol, armor, represents glory and honor. In the book, the finer the armor, the more prestigious its wearer. While armor symbolizes glory and honor, they also have a great value of trust and goodwill. As shown when Glaucus and Diomedes meet in battle, they exchange armor to display their state as friends and or guests. In the Iliad, it was expressed that the armor seems to have a life of its own. The description of Hector's helmet was constantly flashing, which sets him apart from other warriors. The fifth symbol and final symbol are the eagle of Zeus. The reason why they have set the eagle as a symbol of Zeus was because Zeus, who was a king of the god in the Iliad, would often send mortal signs in the form of an eagle. Eagles are Zeus's emblem due to their great eyesight and the distances that they can fly. The eagle sign indicates the direction of Zeus changing favor as seen in the book, when Hector ignores the eagle sign and begins to start his path towards destruction. An eagle served as a good omen, reassuring Priam of Zeus's promise of a safe entry into the Aeacian camp to recover his son's body.
I'm Samsothea and I'll be explaining about the life of Iliad. The life of Iliad presents the tragic yet thrilling reality of human mortality. And as the events unfold, we are ever reminded that our lives are shaped and buffeted by the wind of fate, from which even the central character, Achilles, magnificent warriors that he is, cannot escape. The Iliad recounts a brief but crucial period of the Trojan War, a conflict between the city of Troy and its allies against a confederation of Greek cities, collectively known as the Aeacians. The Iliad has human suffering as one of its main themes. When it does glorify war, heroes, and the importance of faith in person's life, it also shows the ugly underbelly of war. The underbelly of war is injustice, loss, grief, suffering, fear, and death of loved ones. The Iliad shows the fear, worry, stress, and crippling effect of war on participants and those forced to observe it and suffer its effect. Humans may delay fate, but never halt or alter it. And this is true. Even for magnificent warriors such as Achilles, not even the gods are capable of suspending the predetermined course of events and consequences. The ruling aristocratic elite's escape, followed by an economic and cultural decline, also called the Greek Dark Age. During Homer's lifetime, the region was beginning to recover because, among other factors, the Greeks managed to successfully colonize the coast of Asia Minor. However, by setting his heroic and divine myths in the time before 1200 BC, Homer reminded the new nobility of their own glorious past. Therefore, the Iliad came into existence during the first great period of Greek art. Homer's Iliad tells a tale of war. War as the moment when men can become great, as the moment when men reveal their flaw, and as the tragedy of suffering and life loss. Individual, personal, and pitiable in humor theory, neither side is right or wrong. Heroic or villainous, they are both broadly of the same culture, share the same hope and dream, suffer the same fear and pain, and at another time could be sharing each other hospitality. The event that brought the archaic Greek to the wall of Troy are entirely within the control of the human protagonist. And even when they attempt to halt the bloodshed, outside force, which is the god, conspire against them, and yet this seemingly meaningless endeavor is what gives each warrior the chance to achieve immortality through his action. Even today, when many see war as distant and far removed from their day-to-day life, this central contradiction of human activity remains at the heart of life. Being human is about getting up and facing challenges. Although the epic Iliad covered only a period of 52 days in the 10-year struggle for Troy, it provides a broad panoramic view of the Trojan War by flashing back and forth in time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vinita, and I'll be presenting about the main events. Throughout the 9 years of war, there are some major highlights of the events that have happened in the 24 books of Iliad. Starting off is the feud between the king of Mycenae, Agamemnon, and the warrior Achilles. From the previous war, both received a woman, with Agamemnon having Chrysis and Achilles receiving Briseis. Agamemnon decides to refuse on returning Chrysis back to her father, so Apollo created a plague that caused death to many of his men. From this, Agamemnon forced himself to return Chrysis to save his men, but decided to steal Achilles' slave Briseis. Achilles is infuriated by Agamemnon's actions and started a war. Next is Patroclus pretends to be Achilles in the battle. Patroclus tries to persuade Achilles to rejoin the war, but instead, Achilles refuses to do so. Patroclus then decides to dress up and pretends to be Achilles and led his army, the Myrmidons. Patroclus went into the battle and killed numbers of Trojans, but then Hector, one of the great Trojan heroes, killed Patroclus, mistaking him for Achilles. Achilles was so grieved by the death of his best friend and lover that he reconciled with Agamemnon and re-entered the battle. Moving on is Achilles kills Hector and provokes the people of Troy. Achilles meets Hector in a single battle and kills him. To get his revenge for Patroclus, he dishonors the Trojan hero's body by tying it to the back of his chariot and drag it on the ground. Days later, King Priam begs Achilles to stop abusing the body and return it for a proper burial. The Achilles heals. When Achilles was born, his mother Thetis has dipped him into the river Styx to make him immortal, but the spot where she held him his heels remained dry. This resulted in the heels being his only weakness. Paris of Troy hit this vulnerable spot with his arrow and killed Achilles. Continuing with the main events is the new greatest hero. After Achilles had died, the Achaeans wanted to award his armor to the next greatest hero. Odysseus won. This left Ajax mad with rage and committed suicide.
Next is Aphrodite helps Paris. Despite Paris' romance with Helen of Troy and the slaying of Greek hero Achilles, Paris had killed many Archeans. Whenever he was in danger, Aphrodite, a Greek goddess, would shroud Paris in a mist so he could escape back to meet with his lover Helen. The arrow of Hercules and the killing of Paris. After the death of Achilles, Calchas told the Archeans that in order to win the war, they needed the bow and arrow of Hercules. Philoctetes, one of the Greek heroes, rejoined the war after being left on the island of Lemnos and used one of Hercules' arrows to shoot Paris, causing him to die. Lastly, it's the return of Odysseus and the Trojan War. Odysseus then devised a strategy to build a hollow wooden horse with the aid of others that would be left at Troy's gate. The Trojan had observed the sailing away from the Greeks and saw the horse as an offering of peace. They opened the gates as the Trojans cheered and rejoiced and let the horse in. The Greeks who were inside the horse escaped and attacked the whole city of Troy and ended the Trojan War.
Hello, Professor. This is Mary talking, and I will be talking about the morals taught. The Iliad is merely the story of the final period of the Trojan War with a special focus on Achilles' experience of his time period. There are not many times in this epic that a lesson is explicitly explained, so it is left to us, the reader, to determine what the moral universe of the Iliad looks like. Because of this, there is room for debate on precisely what the poem is telling us. That said, there are a few points that most people would agree can be seen takeaways from the plot. The lesson taught in his story is to gain knowledge before entering a situation. Achilles felt the need to avenge his friend's, Patroclus' death. Patroclus helped lead the way to his death in a sword. If Patroclus didn't steal Achilles' armor to scare the Troy soldiers, he wouldn't have been a target. So before deciding to do something when you know the consequences of that situation, always think and gain knowledge. Second, leaders must be respectful too. The central story of the Iliad is that of Achilles withdrawing from the war because he feels his honor has been assaulted by Agamemnon. By way of brief summary, Agamemnon stole Achilles' war prize, a woman named Viseth, to replace his own, whom he had been forced to return her to her father. Agamemnon not only took someone away from Achilles, but did so with no apology or acknowledgement that this might be unfair to Achilles. It's a bit of an understatement to point out that this insult did not go over terribly well. Achilles decided to leave the war, taking his men with him. Moreover, he then asked his mother, the goddess of Thetis, to ask Zeus, the king of gods, to use his power to ensure that the Trojans would begin winning for as long as Achilles sat out the conflict. Needless to say, things start to go badly for the Greeks, and Agamemnon realizes that he needs to take amends. Agamemnon offers an apology to Achilles, understanding that although Achilles is under his command, it's still important not to disrespect the soldiers who fight for him. Leaders need to command respect from their soldiers, but they also need to offer respect in return. Another important lesson taught was that we are limited creatures. Throughout the book, people make decisions for the wrong reasons because they don't see how far ahead, or they can't control their immediate wants and desires, or because they are too proud or arrogant or self-satisfied. It is the fate of humans to make bad decisions and suffer from them. In addition, the poem is well grounded in physical details, not just of killing, but of eating and drinking and harnessing chariots and putting on armor, and weaving all details of living. This realism and close-up view of actions make the switch to the godly heights of Olympus and the gods' views of man even more compelling. It seems to stretch the reader's mind. We see the mind of Zeus and his intentions, and it is overarching and all-knowing, and we quail before it. Back to the mind of Hector's or Patroclus, and we see their limited, their plenty efforts, and feel compassion for them and for ourselves. Hello, Professor. This is Mary talking, and I will be talking about the morals taught. The Iliad is merely the story of the final period of the Trojan War with a special focus on Achilles' experience of his time period. There are not many times in this epic that a lesson is explicitly explained, so it is left to us, the reader, to determine what the moral universe of the Iliad looks like. Because of this, there is room for debate on precisely what the poem is telling us. That said, there are a few points that most people would agree. Next is to accept an apology. All might have started to go well at this point, except Achilles did not decide to accept the apologies of Agamemnon and his offer of gifts. At this stage, the dispute between Agamemnon and Achilles ceases to be Agamemnon's fault. The blame shifts to Achilles' shoulders because his pride prevents him from accepting the apology. Another lesson that could be taken away from this is, of course, bravery and courage. Life throws all kinds of situations at us, but we need to be strong, courageous, and skillful. Though Achilles points out that all men, whether brave or cowardly, meet the same death in the end, the story never asks the reader to question the legitimacy of the ongoing struggle. Homer never implies that the fight constitutes a waste of time or human life. Rather, he portrays each side as having a justifiable reason to fight and depicts warfare as a respectable and even glorious manner of settling the dispute. Such situations cannot easily be predicted or managed, especially if you're going to live a life of adventure. As a result, we need to be strong men with courage to face frightening situations and who have the skills to handle them. We will never be experts at handling every potential crisis situation, but strength, courage, and a high level of physical skill will never ever be a disadvantage. Many may find it amusing to see how Achilles was to his friend, but to seek the revenge and steal the lives of many is far beyond anything anyone could simply do. The next moral is revenge, of course. Throughout the plot, Achilles shows that he was loyal to Patroclus when he sought revenge against Hector for the death of Patroclus. However, revenge is not always the best option. Thetis warned that Hector's death would seal Achilles' fate, and he would soon follow. Achilles did listen, but upon hearing of the death of his friend Patroclus, he became blinded by rage and jumped at the chance to avenge his fallen friend. Blinded by his rage, he killed Hector and sealed his fate. Though he was avenging Patroclus, the omen that his fate would be sealed should have provided him enough of an alarm to rethink his actions. Had Achilles not acted in hasty vengeance by killing Hector and refusing to return the body for burial, Achilles would have saved Priam, Hecuba, and Troy immense grief over not being able to give Hector a proper burial. In the face of these horrors, even the mightiest wars occasionally experience fear, and the poet tells us that both armies regret that the war ever began. The revenge, Achilles shows his ignorance and falters in the end. Lastly, the Iliad recognizes and repeatedly reminds its readers that the creations of mortals have a mortality of their own. The glory of men does not live on their constructions, institutions, or cities. This brought us to think, what is worth of human life? Everything. Even if you had all the gold in the world, or if ever a grain of salt were gold, it would not be worth human life. Thank you. Next is